Deep within the Egyptian Museum in Cairo are two ancient mummies connected by one of history's most fascinating mysteries. One belonged to a pharaoh, the other remained unidentified for generations. Although they were discovered in the same royal collection, researchers spent more than a century trying to understand the connection between them. Their story begins in 1881. Near Luxor, a local family led archaeologists to a hidden shaft carved into the cliffs above the temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari. The shaft descended roughly 20 meters before opening into a network of underground passages. Inside was one of the greatest discoveries in the history of Egyptology, a collection of more than 50 royal mummies, including some of ancient Egypt's most famous rulers: Ramesses II, Tutmosis III, Seti I. Among them were two mummies that would later become central to an ancient royal mystery. One was Ramesses III, one of the final major pharaohs of Egypt's new kingdom. The other was an unidentified young man whose unusual burial suggested that he had died under troubling circumstances. His body had been wrapped in sheepskin rather than prepared according to normal royal traditions. In ancient Egyptian religious practice, this may have been intended as a sign of dishonor. His facial expression also appeared unusually tense, leading him to become widely known as the Screaming Mummy. For years, he received little more than a footnote in the story of the royal cache, but modern research would eventually reveal that his identity may be connected to a conspiracy recorded more than 3,000 years ago. What follows is not simply a legend. It is an attempt to reconstruct an ancient palace plot using historical documents, medical imaging, and genetic evidence. Let's begin with the pharaoh. Ramses III ruled Egypt from approximately 1186 to 1155 BCE. He is remembered for defending Egypt during a period of major conflict across the eastern Mediterranean, including battles against the group commonly known as the Sea Peoples. But an ancient document known as the Turin Judicial Papyrus tells a darker story about the final days of his reign. The papyrus describes a conspiracy within the royal household. According to the surviving text, members of the palace staff, military officials, and several women from the royal harem became involved in a plan to remove the pharaoh from power. One of the accused was a prince named Pentawere. Pentawere was the son of Ramesses III and Queen Tiye, one of the pharaoh's secondary wives. The conspirators allegedly hoped to place him on the throne instead of the chosen heir. The document lists dozens of people who were questioned or punished. However, for many years, scholars were uncertain whether the plot had actually succeeded in harming the king. That changed in 2012. A team led by Egyptologist Zahi Hawass conducted a detailed CT scan of Ramesses III's mummy. The scan revealed a severe injury to his neck that had been carefully concealed beneath the mummy's wrappings. Researchers concluded that the injury was almost certainly fatal. After 3,000 years, physical evidence appeared to confirm that the conspiracy described in the papyrus had reached the pharaoh himself. But the investigation did not stop there. The researchers also studied genetic material from Ramesses III and the unidentified Screaming Mummy. Their results indicated that the two men shared a father and son relationship. Based on the historical evidence, the age of the unidentified man, and the unusual treatment of his body, researchers proposed that he may have been Prince Pentawere. The prince, accused of participating in the conspiracy, may have been discovered beside the pharaoh at the center of it. That possibility raises an important question. Was their placement together accidental, or was it intended to preserve the story of the conspiracy? The royal mummies were moved to the Deir el-Bahari cache by priests centuries after their original burials. Their goal was likely to protect the remains from tomb robbers during a period of political instability. Scholars continue to debate how carefully the mummies were arranged inside the cache. It is possible that practical concerns determined their placement. It is also possible that the priests understood the identities and histories of the people they were moving. We may never know for certain. However, three pieces of evidence help us understand what may have happened. The first comes from the Turin Judicial Papyrus. The document suggests that Pentawere was allowed, or ordered, to take his own life. In other words, he may have been required to end his life rather than face a public execution. This interpretation could explain his unusual burial. Ancient Egyptians believed that proper preservation, ritual preparation, and the continued use of a person's name were essential for reaching the afterlife. Denying someone normal burial customs may therefore have represented both a legal punishment and a spiritual one. The sheepskin wrapping may have marked the young man as someone who had been condemned. The second piece of evidence is the injury discovered on Ramesses III. The CT scan showed that the pharaoh suffered a sudden and serious attack. The location and nature of the injury suggest that it occurred at close range. This supports the possibility that the attack happened inside the palace, where the pharaoh would have been surrounded by officials, servants, guards, and members of the royal household. The papyrus describes a conspiracy that developed within this trusted inner circle. The mummy provides evidence that someone may have succeeded in reaching the king. The third clue was discovered inside the damaged area of the pharaoh's neck. Researchers found a small Eye of Horus amulet placed there by the embalmers. The Eye of Horus was an ancient Egyptian symbol associated with protection, healing, and restoration. Amulets were commonly included in burials, but the location of this one appears especially meaningful. Researchers believe the embalmers may have placed it near the injury in an effort to symbolically restore the pharaoh's body for the afterlife. It was a final act of protection for a king whose death had disrupted the normal order of the royal court. Does this mean every mystery surrounding the conspiracy has been solved? Not quite. The surviving papyrus is detailed, but portions of it are damaged or incomplete. Some names are missing, and certain sections remain difficult to interpret. We know that many people were accused, but we may never know the full extent of the plot. We also cannot identify the screaming mummy with absolute certainty. The available evidence strongly supports a close family connection to Ramesses III, and Pentawere is a leading candidate. However, ancient DNA research is complex, particularly when working with remains that are thousands of years old. Further testing could help answer some of these questions. It could also reveal more about the relationships among the other royal mummies found at Deir el-Bahari. For now, the mystery remains partly unresolved. A pharaoh whose final injury was hidden beneath layers of linen. An unidentified prince whose burial appears to reflect disgrace. A damaged papyrus describing a conspiracy inside the royal palace. And a small protective amulet placed by embalmers who may have understood exactly what had happened. Together, these clues allow us to look beyond the monuments and royal titles. They reveal an ancient court filled with ambition, loyalty, rivalry, and difficult choices. More than 3,000 years later, Ramesses III and the unidentified young man continue to preserve a story that was almost lost to history. The documents give us part of the answer. Science gives us another, but somewhere between the missing sections of the papyrus and the unanswered questions surrounding the royal cache, part of the story is still waiting to be discovered. For more investigations into the mysteries of ancient Egypt, like the video and subscribe to the channel. New stories are released every week, and continue with our next investigation into the hidden chambers and unexplored passages of the Valley of the Kings.